Introducing NASM One, NASM's ultimate membership program. Unlock access to everything your fitness career needs to succeed. Unlimited CEUs, free courses, access to our premium app, and exclusive discounts, all for $35 a month. NASM One is best-in-class tools, cutting-edge certifications, confidence in your craft, and everything you do as a personal trainer made easy, so we can achieve our greatest goals together as one.
Well, hello there, listener, and welcome to this week's episode of the Better Than Fine podcast. I'm your host, Darlene Marshall, and I've got an exciting announcement to share with you at the top of the show today. It's something that I have wanted to do for a long time that I see as the evolution of the Better Than Fine podcast, and that is that starting March 20th, we are going to be live streaming this show each week on YouTube. If you love Better Than Fine and you want to join that live stream, it'll be on 4 p.m. each Wednesday, every Wednesday, with a little wiggle room when I'm on vacation, but I'll give you a heads up when that's going to happen. And if you want to follow along, you can go to YouTube and you're going to find the NASM channel. So it's NASM ORG personal trainer. But honestly, the easiest way is just go up to the search bar and put in the letters NASM, and then you can subscribe to the NASM channel. So we're going to do the very first live show March 20th at 4 p.m. Eastern time. And from there, we'll be live streaming the show each week. Now, related to that announcement, I've got two favors to ask of you. The first favor is we really want to know what you think about this show and the NASM podcast network in general. And we'd like you to please take our listener survey. That survey is going to be linked in this episode's description. Regardless of where you're reading it, you'll be able to find that link. And if you do it, you have the opportunity to win a $100 Amazon gift card as a little thank you for taking the time to give us your information. So thank you for doing that. We really appreciate you. The second favor I want to ask of you, our listeners, is if you listened to last week's episode on the Nova food scale and ultra processed food, and you had some reactions, I'd really like to hear from you, because a number of our regular listeners have reached out to me, not just with their additional questions, things they'd like to learn more about, but also how this episode is affecting you emotionally. And of course, I care a lot about you, just like I care about all human well-being. And I'd really like to understand a bit more about what parts of the episode impacted you for good, or if it was challenging, maybe especially if it was challenging. So if some content of that episode really hit with you, if you could please let me know. You could either DM me on Instagram or you could shoot me an email. It's info@darlene.coach. We're going to definitely be doing a follow-up episode. I'm already collecting questions and thoughts, the things that you had strong reactions to. And so if you want to be part of that episode, or if you just want to let me know what you think, I'd really love to hear from you. Now, let's get to this week's episode. On this week's episode, we're trying something a little bit different. Last week, I was invited to host a webinar at TrueCoach, which if you're not familiar with them, they're an online coaching platform and app. And they invited me to speak to their population about the role of positive psychology in fitness, and to share my vision for what I think the future of fitness could be. And the talk went really well. I'm pretty proud of it, and I thought that you might like to hear it. So for this week's episode, we're going to be sharing with you directly from that talk from TrueCoach. I really hope that you enjoy it. And you're going to also hear at the end, if you're a coach or a personal trainer, NASM has been partnering with TrueCoach, which is part of how I got invited to do this talk. If you're on the TrueCoach platform, you now have a discounted access to NASM One, which is a subscription service that allows you to get a discount on your CEUs. And if you're using NASM One, I've got 2 courses related to this talk that you might want to check out. The first one's called Positively Emo, and it's about the role of positive emotion for the personal trainer or fitness professional and how we prime positive emotion for our clients. The second one is called Holding Space When Things Get Hard, and it's how we hold space for clients' challenging emotions while still remaining in our scope of practice as personal trainers and coaches. So I hope you check them out. I hope you enjoy this episode. And of course, reach out with your feedback about last week's episode. Enjoy.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here with me to talk about fitness through the lens of flourishing around positive psychology and the opportunity to share my vision with you for a potential future for fitness. And obviously, there's lots of ways that fitness gets expressed for ourselves and for our clients. And this is just one set of tools and ideas that I'm really excited to have you in this conversation with me. So I definitely want, I want those questions. I want to reiterate what Rihanna was saying, dropping questions in the chat as we go. We're going to have time at the end. But to get our fingers warmed up and our clicking warmed up, let's drop an emoji in the chat. How are you feeling right now in your day, in your week, about this workshop? Drop me an emoji. Give me a pulse check. How are you feeling with yourself right now? And if you haven't done it already, fill out those 2 poll questions that I asked, because they're going to come up as well throughout this workshop around burnout with your clients and burnout feelings with yourself. Because I feel like this is a buzzword that so many of us have been encountering, and it's some of what we're going to unpack in the workshop today. Oh, Andrea, get those thinking caps on, my friends. I love it. I love it. So thank you, TrueCoach, for having me. Let's get to it. Why listen to me about any of this stuff? Well, my name is Darlene Marshall, and I've been in the fitness and wellness space for 13 years. That feels like the start of my hi, Darlene. I have a master's in applied positive psychology from the University of Pennsylvania, and part of this session is going to be about what positive psychology is. I'm currently a teaching assistant to Dr. Martin Seligman at the University of Pennsylvania. I'm going to introduce you to him in a second. And this fall, I'm going to be an adjunct professor at Nova Southeastern University teaching, wait for it, positive psychology. But related to that, I've been in fitness for 13 years, working as a personal trainer. I'm certified with NASM. I've got PN1. I teach alignment yoga. I've worked as a personal trainer. I mentioned that a second ago, all different kinds of coaching. I've been at this for a hot minute. But like many other personal trainers, this journey didn't start in fitness or psychology for that matter. I used to be an actor. But unlike lots of actors who come into fitness because they see the aesthetics of their work or conditioning their body as an instrument, I was a comedic actor, so it kind of let me off the hook a little bit. So on stage, haha, funny, kissing squirrel puppets. Off stage, not sleeping very much or very well, not eating very well, certainly not caring for my body, and I didn't have the best mental health either. So not long after this picture was taken, not long after my squirrel puppet makeout session, I was diagnosed with a chronic illness, and my prognosis was not very good. I'm old enough that I couldn't just Google what I had. And so I had to rely on the practitioners who were diagnosing me. And what they essentially said was, this condition's progressive. You're not going to get better. You need to prepare yourself for a sedentary life. And I'm really glad I didn't listen to them, because it turns out that there were all kinds of lifestyle practices that I intuitively knew, hey, maybe if I took better care of myself, I'd at least feel better. If this does get worse, maybe it can mitigate. And so that theme of questioning what I was told and questioning what I'd been taught, that's going to be a theme of the talk today. And it was really the tools of fitness that became the vehicle to treat my untreatable illness. And it's genetic. I still have it. I'm going to always have it. But there's lots of lifestyle practices that I learned along the way about taking care of myself that ultimately led me out of fitness, out of entertainment and into fitness. And I ended up becoming a personal trainer. I spent 8 years working for a major corporate luxury brand as a trainer. I became one of the top trainers at my club, then a mentor, a manager, an instructor, and really got into these tools of fitness. I got all of those different pieces of paper with my name on them. I'm sure that many of you have. But what I was getting frustrated with was that my clients, even if I wrote the perfect program, even if I came up with the perfect protocol, it was often their mindset and what was happening inside of them that would affect their ability to change and to be sustained in their changes. And while I was looking for some answers for myself, I came across the field of positive psychology, which is the scientific study of human well being and flourishing. And many of the tools that I learned there, I found that I could apply to my clients. And I had the vision that I'm going to be sharing with you in the workshop today. And so I applied and got into the Master's in Applied Positive Psychology program at the University of Pennsylvania. I was the class of 2020. So as you can see in the slide, I've got my homemade Amazon box graduation cap. And it would be so easy to be like, oh, woe is me. I didn't get a normal graduation. But actually, I got this great opportunity to apply the tools I was learning about positive psychology during the pandemic directly to the clients I was still serving. So I'm going to share with you today some of that journey. But part of that journey was questioning what I had been taught as a personal trainer through this lens of well-being. And I'm really excited to share those insights with you. So I don't know about you. Again, I'm old enough that this meme was very relevant to me while still being a trainer. But I often find that as a personal trainer, my clients expect me to do all kinds of things that are right at the edge of the scope of what I think my job is. So maybe you have encountered this too. I always appreciate that last one of like, what I really do is the therapist, even though as a positive psychology person, I'm not a clinician. But maybe you've had clients who like binge 5 episodes of Huberman Labs and then they come into the session, or they go down a TikTok rabbit hole and they come into the session. They expect you to answer all of their questions like you're some research expert. Or maybe they've had a fight with their partner and they come in and they're crying in the session. And I remember the first time that happened to me as like a brand new baby trainer, and I didn't know what to do. I've figured out a few tools by now. Or you've got a new client and they've had decades of yo-yo dieting and misinformation about nutrition, and you've got to deprogram all of that before you can even get them to do the basics. And then you add to that, for so many of us, we're also competing with like half the internet, and it can seem really overwhelming. And so I want to put this question in your mind as we're thinking about questioning some of what we've been taught. What if we as fitness professionals had the skills to not only keep in scope of the boundaries of our practice, but to also support clients in meaningful lifestyle transformation? And it just so happens that doing so prevents us burning out and our clients burning out, all of which sounds really good to me. So hopefully it sounds really good to you. And the next step on that journey is I want to introduce you to someone. This is Martin Seligman. Dr. Martin Seligman in 1998 was the president of the American Psychological Association, recently elected, and he's giving his presidential address to all of America's brightest psychologists. And he essentially says, we're making a mistake. As the entire field of psychology, we're making a mistake that up until that point, psychology had largely focused on looking at what's wrong with people, what's wrong with all of us. And now we know that when people spend all their time focusing on what's wrong with us, we tend to feel a bit worse. And so what Dr. Seligman presented them with was a compelling argument that what if we started looking at not only what's right with people, like what is the potential good and upside within a human, but if we teach what's right with people to a general population, will they improve their well-being? And at what point do we begin to flourish? And that is considered to be the start of the official field of positive psychology. And now we have about 30 years, almost 30 years, of research and evidence around what does it mean to flourish? What are the tools of well-being? And how can we as practitioners use those tools to build well-being in our clients? And one of the really important things I want you to take away from this is that it's not just a psychology. Certainly, if we start at that kind of rosy red color, the neurophysio, as fitness practitioners, we know that the condition of someone's body, their biological foundation for well-being, and the practices to support it. Certainly you've seen it's been everywhere these last few years that movement is an incredibly effective intervention for depression and for anxiety and for other mental health conditions. So we know there's something going on there around well-being. There's also the psychological, so your mindset. PERMA is the acronym for all of the different facets of well-being. Social. We know that one of those facets of well-being is we need other people. Human beings are pack animals. And so the quality of our relationships has a huge impact on well-being. There's economic and resources. So do we have the resources we need to have a foundation? Ecological. So what's our environment? Is it poisoning us? Is it safe and stable for us? And then we also know that when people have a strong belief foundation in their values or a spiritual or religious practice, that they do a lot better. And when it comes to being fitness professionals, we can stand in the middle of all of that. It starts with recognizing that our clients aren't just a body. It's not only how they move or what they eat or when they sleep or how they work or what they think, it's all of it. Because every person, every one of us on this call, we are a unique, integrated individual. So our job as fitness professionals isn't just boilerplate, right? It's to effectively meet people where they are and then guide them through a process of growth, which is a lot of what well-being application is about. But there's a problem in positive psychology. You go to the doctor when you're sick, you go to the orthopedist when a joint hurts, you go to a mental health professional when you're having mental health problems, but whom do we go to learn to be well? There's this foundational idea in positive psychology that the absence of the bad is not the same as the presence of the good. So who do we go to learn the good stuff? And while I was studying at Penn and this question was coming up, I had this light bulb moment that I can draw you the dots leading right here to this talk with you. Fitness professionals have the most contact hours of any practitioner other than an inpatient rehabilitation facility. So we see our clients more than their general practitioner, more than their physical therapist, unless something's really wrong, more than their mental health counselors, more than any other practitioner. Even if they go to, say, a massage therapist, well, they're probably getting a massage a few times a month. And for us, they're probably seeing us a few times a week, depending on modality. So I want to present you with the argument that we have the potential to be the vehicle for all of the tools of well-being, as long as we're mindful of our scope of practice. Okay. So hopefully that jazzes you up. When I had that thought, I thought Yahtzee. And all of the tools I want to share with you today are based on this idea. But it's not just positive psychology that has the application issue. There is something on the other side of the fence, which is when I was a brand new baby trainer, and then when I became a manager and an instructor and a teacher and a coach of coaches, this problem came up along the way. When I was a brand new baby trainer, I was taught that my clients have three kinds of goals. It's either health, aesthetic, or performance. And that depending on what balance of these three elements my clients had, I could design a program to cause a physiological adaptation to get those outcomes. And when I was studying positive psychology, I had this other light bulb moment of so much of what builds well-being has a physiological correlate. We're going to talk about those in a second. But what if my job as a coach, as a trainer, became, instead of driving one of these three variables, I was going to prime the pump for well-being. And then these are the things that would come along with it. So I would shift my focus of myself and my client to helping them figure out how to be well from a well-being perspective, to flourish and thrive. And then we were going to see the performance come with it. So that's what I'm on about now. But we got to pop the bubble first and recognize, even if this is where we want to go, where are we starting? And we're starting here. 10% of Americans eat enough vegetables. I know we have some people in Norway and Canada. So I don't have your data at my fingertips, but American data is not looking so great for us, huh? So 10% of Americans eat the baseline number of vegetables that were recommended for us every week. 73% of Americans don't get the adequate level of movement. So it's only 27% of Americans meet the baseline for movement. And then depending on whose data we look at, we see this skew of, is it 70%, is it 95%, is it absolutely everybody have some degree of metabolic dysfunction? It doesn't really matter what the number is, it matters that it's not good. And then the sleep data, 30% of Americans didn't get adequate sleep in the last 24 hours, and 40% say they fell asleep unintentionally within the last month, which might not sound like a big deal to you, but how many of them were behind the wheel of a car? How many of them were watching their children in a critical moment that they might have missed? How many of them were in a moment that it could have affected someone else in a way that was unrecoverable? And when we think about how we're handling all of that, these aren't probably new statistics for you, right? It's probably things that you know as a fitness industry professional. But oftentimes, the way we talk about these things, we're driving a negative emotional experience, which we can debate whether or not is a good or a bad thing. But to do that, we got to understand the nature of difficult emotions. And so difficult emotional experiences narrow our focus and our cognition. They limit our divergent thinking, our problem-solving thinking, our like out of the box. And they decrease neuroplastic changes. And the reason is actually an evolutionary adaptation. If a bear busted through the door that was just behind that monitor, bear busts through that door, I don't want to be thinking about what brings me joy. I got to deal with the bear. And that instinct kept our ancestors alive. The problem now is that so many people are walking around overstimulated with like low emotional regulation. And then we're introducing these statistics that just stress them out even more. And so then our clients who are stressed come into our sessions, and what do? Well, we've got to drive those results. So let's put them through a circuit. Let's give them some HIIT. Let's work them out because they want to burn off the stress, right? So that's what we think we want to do. And the last few years haven't really done us any favors. Right? The pandemic era hasn't done us or our clients any favors. Our clients were already sitting a lot. They were already eating junky. They were already stressed out. And these last few years, everyone's been throwing around these words: burnout, resilience, self-care. Now, what you might not realize is there's actually a scientific body of evidence around burnout and resilience. And the resilience piece comes from positive psychology research. So I'm excited to share a bit of that with you. But the body of evidence around burnout is actually specific. So we talk about it in these very colloquial ways, right? We say like, oh yeah, it's such a hard day. I'm so burnt out. Like I'm so fried. And burnout's actually a particular state. And so most of the research in burnout was done in caregiving professions before the pandemic started. And now we have a few years of data in the post-pandemic or epi-pandemic era. But the body of research would look at professionals and caregiving professionals. So a lot of nurses studies. And I really like this quote by Christina Maslach it's the personal agony of job stress. Because I think it sums up in 6 little words so many things. So it's overwhelming physical exhaustion. You're tired to your bones. And the cynicism and detachment piece is that you're tired, but you're tired because you've been striving so hard to try to make an impact. And then it doesn't work out and you become cynical. And with that comes this sense that you are ineffective, that you cannot accomplish your goals. And unfortunately, in this post-pandemic era, many of our clients are reporting that they are burnt out. So I'm going to go to the poll here. Of the people who responded to the poll, thank you for the half of you that did. I appreciate your data so much. I know we got one adjustment there from Mackenzie. I see you. It looks like we've got about 30% of you said that your clients are regularly telling you that they are burnt out. Another 40% said, yeah, but it's been a little while. So we've got clients who are experiencing burnout, but maybe if you're lucky, it's been a hot minute. And one of the things that's important to recognize about burnout is that, this idea that it's cumulative, it's ongoing, and it's psychological and physiological. So it's not like you had a bad day, now you're burnt out, right? It's had a prolonged period of stress that's now affecting the ability to focus, the ability to feel effective in my life. And as I alluded to a moment ago, oftentimes the conversation about stress in fitness are saying, like, just go hard and burn off that stress. But we want to understand what is stress and what's going on with the burnout conversation and the burnout experience in our clients. Why are they burned out? And if burnout is related to psychology and cynicism, how does this affect our scope of practice as fitness professionals? So back in the 60s, Martin Seligman, the positive psychology guy, he discovered this concept called learned helplessness. And personally, I actually think that this is an even more important contribution than positive psychology, but positive psychology is the one he gets the big cred for. And essentially, what Seligman discovered while he was still a student was that mammals who are in situations that they perceive to be inescapable, unsolvable problems will give up. And so even when that situation becomes solvable, they no longer want to try. I don't know if it's mammals, I guess if it's not humans, the want question. But if it's humans, they won't try. Animals won't try because they have learned to be helpless. And in humans, that experience correlates with depression. We become cynical that things can't change. And the good news is that mammals, humans, we can be led out of that condition. And the hope that things will get better is a major factor for improvement. We hope for things to be better, we become more optimistic, and then we make the effort to improve. And I think this is the part where we come in. Even if our clients who are experiencing burnout are going to a clinician, they're working with a mental health practitioner, we can be the ones to teach them the upside. Because what's that therapist going to do? They're going to talk about the problem. They're going to look at the problem, examine their patterns. They're going to ruminate a little bit together. But we can be the upside of that equation by delivering the practices in their lifestyle that help them recognize they can be effective. They can shape their reality with their choices. So let me teach you a bit more about positive psychology now that we've set that stage. And we're going to get into your feelings some more. So I mentioned a moment ago, difficult, negative emotional experiences narrow our condition, they narrow our focus. The good news is positive emotional experiences are cognitively different than the negative ones. They open us up. We become more creative. We're better problem solvers. We're neurologically more flexible. And that makes us better at learning new skills, at making new friends. We even experience less racial bias when we have been primed with a positive emotional experience. And Barbara Fredrickson coined the phrase broaden and build theory of positive emotion. So it broadens our cognition, it opens us up, and then we're able to learn new things. We explore our reality and we make new friends. That's the build part. Now we've got more resources. And then from that more resourced place, we're more resilient to challenge and less likely to burn out. Well, I want to take this one step further for you. So Fredrickson's other major theory, you might have heard this word and not known that it's actually science and not woo-woo. The upward spiral theory is when you have multiple compounding positive factors. So let me break this down for you. You get your client to start meditating, and then they're more relaxed before they go to sleep. And then because they slept better, they wake up earlier, they meditate some more, and they have a better day. So they meditate some more and then they sleep even better and they wake up on time and they meditate some more. And now they're starting to build some momentum. So they've got better self-regulation. They make better nutritional choices. So now they're meditating, they're sleeping better, they're eating better, they're meditating, they're sleeping better, they're eating better. And then now they feel like they have the energy to work out and they actually recover from that workout. And this is the example of the upward spiral theory of lifestyle change, where positive experiences that actually feel good to the person having them, boosts our unconscious desire to do it again. Oh, I felt so good after that yoga class. I can't wait to come back tomorrow. Oh, you know what? I felt so much calmer after that meditation you gave me. I fell right to sleep last night. And then because it feels good, we have an emotional payoff. The repetition is more consistent. That repetition leads to increases in adaptation and resources. And then in that increased resource, we get a more leveraged place for the progression, for the next peel of the onion. So this aha moment that I had at the University of Pennsylvania around well-being was that triggering and sustaining upward spirals often comes from lifestyle practices. And we, as fitness professionals, are the best positioned to deliver those lifestyle practices to our clients because there is a physiological foundation to well-being. So let me give you a few examples. Even though we're talking about burnout, it's not just about the psychological side. It's not just about rest. It's about resetting the stage for building a sense of what's called efficacy, my belief that I can have goals and shape my reality to achieve those goals. And that then becomes an antidote to the cynicism. And if we push our clients, if we push ourselves further into that overwhelmed space, what we're doing is deepening the sense of helplessness. So these physiological factors and foundations of well-being, just a few quick examples. There's research indicating that 20 minutes of moderate intensity, I can't say that word strongly enough, moderate intensity cardiovascular exercise increases our sensitivity to our own serotonin. So anything you've seen around depression and running or depression and movement, depression resilience, the increase of movement for the efficacy of SSRIs, antidepressant drugs, that's what this is, right? It's the neurological change and adaptation that comes with moderate intensity exercise. If you want to geek out about that super hard, I recommend you read the book, The Joy of Movement by Kelly McGonigal. It's fabulous. Sleep, one of the most powerful protective interventions against depressive, anxiety, impulsive behaviors is not just sleeping, but effective sleep, restful sleep, regulated sleep. We all know by now, gut microbiome increases inflammation, it affects mood, it affects mental health. And then if you know anything about flow, states of flowed engagement, there are all kinds of physiological practices that neurologically set the stage for what originally was a psychological concept. Flow, for anybody who doesn't know about flow, Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi discovered this altered state of cognition, put clients into fMRI machines. He did not put clients into fMRI machines. He described the state. If you've ever had the state of engagement where time slips away, you lose your sense of yourself, and you're just immersed in what you're doing, right at the emergent edge of your own capability, and it feels so good, that's flow. And now we can see neurologically what's going on in the brain. And physiologically, many of the practices that we're the experts on increase the ability to engage in flow. So then this begs the question, if our practices are these tools that can build well-being, how do we use it? And the first priority, not the only priority, but the very first one, is that the best exercise program is the one that your clients will do consistently. So if they enjoy something, if they like something, and it doesn't even have to be the exercise choice itself. It could be that they like you. It could be that they like the playlist. It could be that their best friend does it with them. It really doesn't matter what the specific of the thing they like, but if they get a positive emotional experience from doing the thing, they're more likely to do it again. And then, as we just mentioned, there's these other factors that we want to consider. Moderate intensities increase their sensitivity to serotonin. Higher intensities can stress the nervous system. So when we're working with someone who's burnt out, who's actually burnt out, high intensity becomes a side dish, not the main course, because that profound physiological exhaustion we're like, okay, burn off the stress. And we've all had that type A client that comes in and you can just look at them and you see how stressed out they are. If we hammer that person, they're not recovering well. And so eventually that's going to push them further underwater. And the psychological evidence that when you focus on literally any other factor than how someone works, they will be more motivated, they will be more consistent, and even if they had the same results as someone who's focused on aesthetics, they will be happier with the outcomes. They will have higher well-being, they will be more consistent with a longer lasting tail of consistency. Now, as for us, the most important factor, the most important predictor of the efficacy of your program, this is for fitness professionals, this is also for clinical professionals, is their relationship with us. When we are a trusted space, when we are patient with them, when we have a sense of humor, and we make it enjoyable for them or safe for them to be with us, that's when the program becomes most effective. And it's very important to note here that we as practitioners create the experience not only of them in the session, but also their concept of what fitness is and what it's about. And I want to just put a quick note here around shame. I think shame right now, especially in social media, is a big topic. And if you wanted to nerd out about that, I was a guest on Rick Ritchie's NASM CPT podcast, and we covered this together. That episode is in, I believe, October of 2023. And the difference between guilt and shame. So guilt is an emotion where we think, oh, the thing that I did was bad. I should not have yelled at my partner. That was bad. I feel a little guilty. Shame is when we internalize that as an identity. I am bad. And shame hurts our clients. It hurts us because from an outcome perspective, shame drives short-term behavior. So I'll change as long as I'm still interacting with the community or the group that has made me feel ashamed of myself. But the moment that I'm away from them, I'll probably revert behavior. And from an evolutionary perspective, our ancestors, if somebody was doing something dangerous to the group, they needed the shame to get that person to stop, because being isolated from our group that we belonged to would be very threatening to our survival. But now there's many places that we as a fitness industry are creating experiences of shame that at one time we thought would drive results. And I think of the 90s, the early 2000s, where we were getting examples of fitness professionals who would use shame as a motivating tool. And I think many of us know now, okay, that isn't great. But I can't tell you how many times as a practitioner, I still have new clients come in and I can tell that they're so scared, they're terrified, that I'm going to treat them like their past trainers have treated them, because those trainers were creating a sense of shame in that client, whether knowingly or not. And I think fitness professionals, we're so driven by caring for our clients. We're such a passion-driven industry that it's got to be well-meaning. But you might want to consider, where are the places that your marketing or the way you talk to clients about themselves and their bodies, could we do a better job of not driving shame and increasing their self-awareness, their self-acceptance? And like I said a moment ago, when we shift away from aesthetics-focused goals, clients are more consistent, they have a better experience, and that consistency means they're more successful, they're more consistent going forward, right? It's a longer tail of consistency and application. And all of this brings me around to all of you. I'm sure that many of you are not only here to hear about clients, you're also here to hear about burnout for yourselves. And so if I go back to the poll, and again, thank you to the people who responded, almost 40% said, yes, I am recently or currently burnt out. Half saying I'm burnout, but it's been a little while. And just under 20% saying I haven't been burnt out. I don't know what you're talking about, Darlene, which is fine. We all have different experiences, all have different thresholds. That's part of what working with humans is interesting, excited about, right? Like we can always find a way to figure out some nuance and experience. But for those of you who said, I either have been or I currently am burnt out, which we're looking at almost just over 80% of you said that that is true of you. So let's talk a little bit about trainer well-being. I think as practitioners, we got to recognize that all of the same things I just said about our clients can be true of us too. So, 13 years in fitness, I've certainly seen a lot. I've been body shamed by my own management. I've had other trainers make comments about my body that made me feel a certain kind of way. I've had people that I looked up to put out programming or social media content that made me question myself and get imposter syndrome. So I've been there too. The body dysmorphia, the orthorexic eating, the hours, right? This is a passion-driven job that we pour ourselves into, and we want to do a good job because we love our clients, we love this work, and we believe so much in what we do. But that also means that we wrap up our identities in what it means to be a personal trainer or a coach. And in that identified space, when we start to question ourselves, it hurts us in some pretty deep ways. And so how we mitigate that from a burnout perspective, finding like-minded practitioners, people who think like you. And if you are listening to this talk and you think, oh my goodness, woman, like you get me, reach out. Like I want to hear with you because this is me too. Like communities of practice happen at all levels. And having really good boundaries. So many of us, me too, become friends with our clients. We care so much about them. But how many times have you agreed to work on a day that was supposed to be your day off? Maybe you needed the money or you really like that client. You didn't want them to go off program, so you show up anyway. Or the client is texting you late at night when you're supposed to be relaxing or hanging out with your friend or your partner and you're responding. So having a real clear scope of application with clear boundaries and very well set expectation with those clients. I know for me, I had to create the rule of thumb that in order for a client to kind of trip over the boundary into being my friend, I needed to be able to trust that they would respect both sides of that fence. So when they were my friend zone, they weren't going to ask me to work. And when we were at work, they weren't going to treat me like their friend. And when a client gets invited over that fence, we have that conversation. And they've come to expect that from me. And then the last one, and this comes directly from my partner is also a 25-year career personal trainer, and I take this directly from him, is you have to prioritize your most important client, which is you. So are you getting your workouts? Are you carving out time to get enough sleep? Are you making time between clients to eat? Because if you're not training your most important client, you're not going to have the energy to be effective. And then from that lack of efficacy, we're driving the exhaustion with the cynicism. And so I've burnt out in the course of my fitness career because I didn't have a strong community practice, good boundaries, and I wasn't making time to train my most important client. And I think this is an important conversation for us to be having as an industry. How do we protect the physical and mental health of our practitioners so that we aren't driving these more, I don't know, it feels like everything is toxic right now in the conversation in the world. So I don't want to use that word, but we're not driving these maladaptive practices. There we go. That's a pretty neutral sounding word. All right. And then there's one last person I want to introduce you to. So this is Christopher Peterson. He's considered to be one of the other founders of the field of positive psychology. The third one is named Ed Diener. And unfortunately, Dr. Peterson's no longer with us. He passed a decade ago, I believe. But Dr. Peterson, when asked early on in the days of positive psychology, to sum up positive psychology, he said, I could do it in 3 words: other people matter. And in fitness, in wellness, we believe so deeply that other people matter that we make it our whole lives. But that also can mean that we are, often getting in our own way in the application of how those people matter and how we present our tools. And I think if we got out of our own way a little bit and recognized that the tools of fitness can be so impactful beyond what we're currently thinking of. If we can question what we're being taught just a little bit, we can start pushing the boundaries of application and be so much more effective in this broader scope of an integrated practice. And we are the ones, because we're the boots on the ground, we're the ones with the power to change it. All right, so let me give you some resources before we go to questions. Recommended resources. If you are a TrueCoach coach, Rhea is going to come back on in a second and talk about the integration with NASM One, but I have 2 courses on NASM One right now. One is it's called Positively Emo. It's a much deeper dive into the positive emotion research and how we can apply it as coaches and fitness professionals. The other one is called Holding Space When Things Get Hard. And it's how do we handle when the client shows up crying because they just had a fight with their partner? How do we hold the space for the challenging emotions and still stay in our scope of practice? And then lastly, I want to give you some more, there's also books here, excuse me. They probably seem kind of obvious about what they're about, but from positive psychology perspective, Why We Sleep, Stop Missing Your Life is around present moment awareness. It's by Corey Muscara. The Power of Meaning is Emily Esfahani Smith. It's about meaning and purpose. Joy of Movement, I already mentioned. Spark is another great movement book. And then Atomic Habits is about behavior change. I think most people know the first one and the last one. And then, of course, I want to plug my own podcast. It's called Better Than Fine. Got a Substack. If you want to read the shame stuff, I just wrote about shame last week, 2 weeks ago. Instagram, find me at darlene.coach. All of the citations for this talk are at darlene.coach/neurosports. And then if you're interested in this idea of application around how do we facilitate well-being for our clients using the tools of lifestyle through a positive psychology lens, NASM has a coaching certification, certified wellness coach. I was one of the contributing authors, had a great time making this course with them. And the lowest price available for the entire course is this code here. So Marshall CWC, I'll drop it in chat too. But if you're thinking about becoming a wellness coach or you want to enhance your fitness coaching practice through the lens of these kinds of tools I'm describing, that's a really great place to start. Okay, questions? I think Ree's going to come back on and join me. But if anybody has any questions, drop them in the chat. Love to hear your thoughts, your questions, your reflections on positive psychology and fitness.
Please, if you guys have questions, hello, welcome back. Is this webinar eligible for NASM CEUs? That is a great question. Attending this webinar itself, Darlene, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but is not eligible for a CEU.
No, but if you are a TrueCoach coach and you use NASM One, it gets you access to CEUs through NASM One. So Rhea, I don't know how that integration exactly works. So to be clear, I'm not an NASM employee. I have been one of their subject matter experts for their coursework, but
Sure.
I appreciate your question.
Yeah, I will show on the last slide too how as a TrueCoach coach, or we can get you signed up as a TrueCoach coach, you can access these NASM CEUs and the 2 courses that Darlene has with them. We do have a question, or I guess a comment from Chantel. No questions, but thank you for sharing. Appreciate you being vulnerable with us about your experiences. And I think she probably speaks for everyone, because it's nice to know that we all kind of live the same and feel the same feelings as fitness professionals. So it's nice to feel kind of like we all have this shared experience.
Yeah, thank you for that reflection. I think it's really important for us as practitioners, as the experts, to be vulnerable about the things we struggle with and honest about what our challenges are, because there is a presence online that creates this perception of perfection. And then we start to wonder, well, what's wrong with me that I'm not like that person, that influencer, that whatever. But when we're honest about our experience, then we give other people permission to be human. And so to let people know, like, yeah, I'm a trainer, I'm a coach, I'm Martin Seligman's TA right now, and I still have these very human experiences, because we all do. It's part of being a human.
Sure. Yeah, I can agree with that. And I think, again, it just makes us like a safe space to like, okay, I can feel these things too. I don't have to pretend they don't exist. We have a question from Bobby. Would love to hear how you protect your own energy when providing empathy towards your client. So this balance between, extending that empathy and also like giving yourself the grace and protecting your own boundaries.
Yeah, thank you, Bobby. And I think, I'm going to make a little bit of a word salad here, but I promise we're going to get it there. I'm trying to remember the name of the author, and maybe Cecilia, if you remember the name of the author, you can drop it in the chat. But the book is Against Empathy, and it's an inflammatory title intentionally, right? You're trying to get people to react to your book, but essentially it's the argument. Whether we call it empathy or we call it compassion, it's the idea that if empathy is I'm identifying with another person's emotions, and compassion is I can recognize someone else's emotions and then do something to be helpful. So I don't want the surgeon that's so upset that they have to do the surgery, that they're like crying and their hands are shaking, right? I want the surgeon that's compassionate and they're able to recognize my need for assistance and then do what needs to be done. And so as a practitioner, there are times that my client is going through something that's so big and intense. And I think of, I work with special populations. I work with other people with chronic illness. And so I've worked with cancer patients. I've worked with people at the end of their life. And I'm supporting their families emotionally as I support their well-being through the end of their life. And those can be some very intense moments. And when that's happening, I just own it to the client, like, hey, I'm getting emotional here with you. If that's too much, I can excuse myself. But most of the time I see my role as holding the container for their emotion, not necessarily being in it, like soft quotes, with them, because then I'm going to be less effective. And to take that answer one step further for you, Bobby, I make a lot of time and space for my most important client. So I make sure I'm meditating and sleeping and doing my breath training and time in the hot tub or cold plunge. I'm going for walks. I'm talking to my own providers and care practitioners, and I've got a great community. So Cecilia, being in that community just dropped. It's Paul Bloom, Against Empathy. Thank you, Cecilia. I appreciate you very much.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you. Thank you. We have another question from Benjamin. What is the border between being a coach and being an intimate person for the client? So I think just creating that, again, that boundary between I am your coach, but also like we do share this intimate space quite frequently. You're telling me your problems, I'm helping you with your wellness. Like, how do you kind of navigate that boundary?
Yeah, it's such an important question. It's scope of practice. I've got to know what my scope of practice is based off of my qualifications and stay within that scope. And I think it's very common to see, especially social media influencers, influencer culture, we see that scope start to creep. And so if I'm not trained in a modality like treating mental health problems, I'm not going to work in that modality, which doesn't mean that I don't care. Like if my client shows up to a session and they bring up something that's like, okay, that's a big one. That's a big indicator of mental health. So another useful tool might be just being aware of mental health first aid. So if I know that my client is saying the things that are indicative of depression, the next question out of my mouth is, have you booked a session with your therapist? And treating that mental health challenge is not my scope of practice. And so I can have that intimate relationship, that caring relationship, and I can also be the canary for their coal mine. And that's an important role that I play in their lives, especially when I work with people with a history of mental health challenges. I hope that answered your question.
I thought that was great. I think it just does help the coach draw a defined line between, this is what we're here for. And as much as I want to support you, I'm not qualified to do that, but I can, direct you or like Gentaro said, refer out, kind of maybe create a referral there.
Well, and I want to add one more level. And I think this was on the boundaries slide. I'll click back through. Clear scope and well set expectations. I have that conversation with my clients in the consult. When they say, yes, I would like to work with you, I say, okay, I want to be very clear with you. I'm not a mental health clinician. That's not what I do. And so if ever something comes up like this, are you working with a therapist? Have you ever worked with a therapist? And I get that information as part of my intake. And then I tell them, if you ever do bring up something that I professionally think it's a good idea, I'm going to tell you. And they will say, thank you. And if as part of my screening, because I don't just take every client that comes, right? I take the clients that are a good fit for me. And if the reaction I get to that is, I don't believe in therapy, you're like, well, then we're probably not a good fit. Uh, and that might be someone that I refer to a different practitioner because I might not be able to effectively help them. They might not be ready for the type of help I give, I guess.
I think that's great. Well said. We have a question from Yudo. Excuse my mispronunciation. Hello, what do you think is the key to not feeling frustrated when a client feels bad about not being able to improve? And do you, as a coach, know that they can, but they're just kind of sunk in this sadness and frustration?
Okay, I rolled up so I could look at the question myself because there's a couple of layers here. The first, if the question is about me not feeling frustrated, one of the most important paradigm shifts in my career has been to recognize that I am not responsible for their changes or lack of change because it's their process and they're adults and it's their responsibility. And very early in my career, I thought, oh, if I were good at this, I would be able to help everybody. But not everything works for everybody all the time because not everybody needs the same things in their lives at a given moment. And so if a client is not improving, even the phrase here, right? As you say, a coach knows that he can and is sunk into sadness or frustration. It's not for me to say if they can. They get to say if they can. And to me, that's the difference between being a wellness coach and being a personal trainer. Training is prescriptive because I'm writing a prescription of movement. And when I'm working as a coach, I'm creating the space for their process that happens inside themselves. And so I don't get to say, oh, they're sunk in their sadness and frustration. I'm going to meet them where they are and help them see it from a different angle. And if the tools that I know as a coach are ineffective, that's when I'm going to say, have you spoken to your therapist about this? I'm not saying I never feel bad for a client. I may feel compassion, I may feel empathy, but to be frustrated that they're not improving would mean that I'm responsible for their improvement. And I feel very strongly that that's a paradigm that needs to shift in our industry.
I can really appreciate that, and I like the distinct, differentiation between being a wellness coach and a personal trainer, like that prescriptive process versus like just giving them the space to, have their own journey. We have another. Oh, go ahead.
I just say one more thing about that. I wrote a book about that that's available on my website if you want. It's only $5. So if you go to my website and click trainer at the top, I wrote a book about that topic if you want to read it.
Incredible. Yeah, definitely drop all the links, all the plugs. We have a question from Chase. This might be a question for sort of both of us, but saying most everyone is NASM. I have NSCA. Should I do NASM to utilize this information? I know you are NASM certified, so I don't know if you want to speak to that a little bit more.
Well, for the first 8 years of my career, I was NCSF, and then I switched to NASM for CPT, for Certified Personal Trainer. For this information, it's the wellness coaching certification. So the CPT cert focuses on, being an effective personal trainer. It's an excellent certification, but the wellness coaching personal certification focuses more on the mental, physical, and emotional holistic approach to facilitating a process, as opposed to writing an exercise prescription. So hopefully that helps, Case.
That's great. Yeah, and at the end too, I'll if you're not already a TrueCoach coach, I will drop the link as well to sign up for a 14-day trial. And with that, you also, once you become a paid coach, you have the ability to sign up through NASM for these continuing ed. So that will be available there as well. We also have a question from Benjamin. What is the difference between having a good psychological approach of a high performance athlete and an average client?
I haven't worked with high performance athletes. I work with high performers in other, industries. I've worked with celebrities and ambassadors and, CEOs. But in terms of high performance athletes specifically, it's such a narrow slice of population and application. In terms of the psychology of it, athletic psychology, I'm sure that's not the word I want. What is the word I want? Performance psychology, there we go, is its own subset and discipline. And so I'm going to own my own scope of practice as it's not my specific expertise. But what I do understand of it is often about finding the sweet spot in upregulation, right? Like if flow happens and we want anyone in a moment of peak performance to be in an optimal state of flow, flow happens when we're not too mellow and we're not too upregulated. We've got to be in this sweet spot window. If you want to hear an actual performance coach talk about this, Chris Bertram, who is the flow coach for the Big Air Sports Canadian, like snow Big Air Sports team, so the Olympic snowboarders and skiers, he was a guest on my show in, I think, November of 2022, and did a great job unpacking the mindset of priming flow for performance. So I'll give you that nod. And it looks like Intaro has given us a conscious coaching book. Thank you in the chat.
Yeah, it's great. No, everyone's giving recommendations. I
love it.
Love that. Me too.
Teamwork,
Given all these
community of practice.
Of course. And before we head to that last slide, I have a question for you because I don't see any more in the chat at this moment, but I think everyone could benefit from this. As a coach in the space, what are ways that you or, as a coach can tell a coach to recognize like signs of burnout before it's full-fledged, before it's too far gone? Like, what are some ways that maybe you've noticed, throughout your career where you're like, okay, now I know the signs, I know what it looks like.
Yeah. So thank you for this one. If I've got a client who's consistently just exhausted, that's my first blinking dashboard light. The second blinking dashboard light is when they start to get real cynical, and they're no longer interested in the things that once gave them joy. If you've never heard of the word anhedonia, or it's this idea that the things that made us feel joy are no longer pleasurable. And so that's this, we've got this psychological state where they're starting to get cynical and detached. We get this physiological exhaustion. When you start noticing clients going down that path, that's when you want to start intervening. And so what I do first is dial back the intensity of their workouts because I don't want to make them more exhausted. I check with them that they're eating, and I try to intervene on their sleep. And if none of that works and they're extremely cynical in that moment, that's when I'll say, hey, I'm concerned as someone who cares about you. I'm seeing these warning signs, and I'm pretty straightforward about it because my clients expect that of me. And what I suggest is setting that expectation from the jump with your clients that you're going to intervene if you notice something concerning.
Sure. Yeah, I can appreciate that, and setting the expectation so down the road they're not getting offended, that you're bringing it up is more of like, this was a part of our agreement. I just want to make sure that you're okay. Bingo. Essentially.
Bingo.
All right, so heading into this last slide, guys, I'm gonna go ahead and drop the link in the chat as well. You can follow this link to sign up for the 14-day free trial with TrueCoach if you are not already a TrueCoach coach. But once you have a paid subscription, you will have access to NASM CEU library. So, getting those continuing education credits as a fitness professional, and you'll have access to Darlene's CEU content if that's, not a perk enough. And you'll find that in your profile settings. So again, you can follow this link, or if you are already a coach, you can head into your TrueCoach dashboard, profile settings, and NASM CEU library, just making it easier and more accessible for us to stay certified and on top of things. Darlene, anything else you would like to add before we jump?
No, I just want to thank TrueCoach for having me. We got connected through NASM, so shout out to, I know you all say NASM, but we say NASM on the inside. And just thank you. Thank you for your questions and your curiosity. And of course, reach out if you have any questions for me. I'm Darlene.coach on Instagram, and I'd love to hear from each and every one of you, any of your thoughts.